Well, hello everyone, and welcome to another episode of You, Me, and ICED. I've got a full board today with all my illustrious co-hosts joining me. Mr. B, who is the sponsor and co-host of this program, and it comes from his program, Free Talk with Mr. B, and his book, The Art of Giving Back. So be sure and check that out. And R.W. Harper, who is a fantastic video game producer and has worked for some of the best names in the business, and he's a writer as well, and my creative partner at Blue Genie Media. So, and Richard Dee, who is an illustrious author with 16 titles till date. So I'm very proud of my co-hosts. I'm very, very proud to be in such wonderful company. And, books are the topic of the day, sort of. It's the fact that books oftentimes make it to the silver screen and they become either movies or television shows or video games and/or video games. So that's what we're going to be discussing. I think all of us have a lot of input we'd like to get to with that. So I could give you one example that I think is a classic example of why it's so important to honor the author, when making a film out of a book. And that's, to me, The Godfather. The Godfather is pretty much a play-by-play of the novel The Godfather. I mean, part one, part two, and part three were not based on novels because there were no novels after the Godfather novel, but the actual first straight up novel was pretty much straight on from the book, and even the author had something to do with the screenplay as well. And lo and behold, it's a piece of classic American literature and classic American cinema. There's hardly anybody who doesn't know, the story of The Godfather now. So to me, that means honoring the author's story is best. But a lot of people may think that embellishments are also extremely valuable. What do you think, Rod? Why don't you
Yeah,
take it away?
yeah. I've got a good bit of experience adapting books to video games, but also I've worked on some projects to where we were doing video games and movies at the same time based on books. Um,
Okay.
back several years ago, I worked with Michael Crichton. He had a game company, but he had just published the book Timeline, and it was being made into a movie, but it was also being made into a video game at the same time.
Amazing.
One of the things was the video game had a slightly different plot line than the movie, and the movie had a slightly different plot line than the book. But overall, all three used the same characters, same settings, and the overall tropes and locations and situations of the book. But any purist that actually read the book usually found plenty of complaints with the video game versus the movies. And one of the biggest things that you encounter when you're trying to adapt a book to a movie is the temporal element. Um, in a book, you have the luxury of pages and imagination, and you can actually take as much time as you want in a timeline to tell your story, uh, build your characters. Lord of the Rings, that trilogy, the movie, based on the book actually took place many decades, 30, 40 years. Um, Frodo never actually went on his journey to return the ring until about 15, 20 years after they had that party. But in the book, it seemed like it was the next day. Um, when you're making a movie, you don't have that opportunity to take your time to tell the story. You have to
Right.
keep it moving along because you have 180 minutes on average to keep the user's attention and keep their
Yeah.
butt in the seat at the theater. So you can't, you know, have a 6 hour movie and expect to,
No.
tell the story. Same thing with video games. Video games, we have a finite budget. It's very expensive to make a video game, and we have to truncate the timelines to work with the design of the game and be
Right.
able to go from start to finish and entertain the player as if they were actually playing the book. So
Right.
it's a big challenge either way you do it, but it's one of those things that you will always have your critics, and it's just something you have to live with.
That's true. That is true. What about you, Richard? Do you have a take on this?
Yeah, I've been to see so many movies that I've read the book of first, and I've been disappointed in. And the
Is that
from the
consistently
yeah,
disappointed, or were
just
you
just
ever?
by the way that when I've read the book, I've imagined it in my mind, I guess, and I've pictured
Mm.
the scene as described by the author, and I've created my own environment. And then to see someone else's version of it is not always as good,
A bit of a
if you know what I
letdown, huh?
mean. Yeah, it is a bit, and very often I wonder why they took the parts they did to make the film and they left out some of the other stuff. I understand that you've got a finite time as RW says, and you've got to choose which bits to put in, but sometimes I think the bits they left out were more important than the bits they left in, if you see what I mean. And conversely,
Yeah.
I've seen some really good movies and then been unable to get into the book. So I don't know. I suppose it's all subjective, I think, and certainly my mind seems to work in a different way to a lot of people that produce books and movies.
Well, probably because as a writer, you have a really vivid imagination. So maybe
Oh,
what
yeah.
you kind of conjured in your head was way better than what the screenwriters and the producers, came up
I would
with.
say better. I'd just say different. I think it's just
Different,
yeah,
right?
I got a different take on things, and as I said, I'm not saying the films weren't good, but
Right. Just not
they
what you
weren't
expected.
they weren't what I was expecting, and I felt
No.
almost sort of let down a bit in the way that someone else's imagination played out compared to mine, if you see what I mean.
Yeah. What about
and
you, Mr. B? What's your
and you guys
experience with
you guys are
this?
using the word that I that bothers me sometimes is the word imagination, and it gets in a quagmire where my wife and I are sitting on the couch watching the movie, and her imagination is completely different than mine. Completely. And then she would be fussing about why they left something out, or they can't do that, she would say. And I was like, honey, yes, they can. Just use your imagination, because it's like she would try to figure out why are they able to go so long without ever using the restroom. It's like, no, use your imagination. They don't need to include that. You know? And things like that, there's little quirky things. How did they get from that point to that point? And so, yes, in a movie is very different. Where the book, you can describe the struggles that it takes, or the journey that it took to get to that point, to deal with issues associated with like transporting themselves or going through the day, and you saw them on another day and you just couldn't figure out whether they took a shower. And yes, honey, don't drive me crazy with the shower thing. They took a shower, you just can't see it.
Does she literally ask, do you think they took a shower
Because
before
in the
they went out?
movie, like Richard is saying, and Rodney brought it up too, it's like it leaves room for imagination. And so you might see someone just woke up, stuck a piece of toast in their mouths, and before you know it, he's adjusting his tie to take the kids to school. And in a movie, they have to cut out so much stuff to fit the time.
Right.
You wouldn't be able to describe that. But if the guy had stomped his toe on the bed foot before going to take a shower, we can write that in the book that causes delay and how he got to the kitchen. Where they may cut that out of a
Right.
movie, you have to use your imagination for it.
Right. You just have to assume that they went to the shower,
Things like
and
that.
maybe even to the bathroom as well.
Yeah. So the movie
Right.
brings in those technicalities where the book can itemize the details if necessary about that.
Right. Do you guys think that there's ever been like a book that has been worse than the movie? Like the movie literally made it better? I mean, I know of one, but I'm curious what you would say.
Any
Any examples? Something that was improved upon by the movie. Well, let me just tell
can't
you,
think of
I
one.
mean, my opinion is the Bram Stoker's Dracula, although it was a great book, it was kind of draggy at some points because it was all like the journals, of the various characters, and it just felt a little dry, at times, and not so much of the vampire action and those scenes where he's like, I mean, and then the film just kind of like brings that out and makes it far more mysterious, and a lot more action is happening. What do you think?
I think one of the issues there is when you're talking about classic literature like Bram Stoker, the way they spoke, the way they wrote, the whole narrative was not really familiar to our modern way of reading books. So it's a little more work, in my opinion, to read
Yes.
Bram Stoker.
It's a lot of work to get through it.
Yeah, even classics like the original Tarzan novels,
Good
and
example.
which were really just short stories, but still,
Yeah.
it's just the language that was used and the way it was used. It just, to me, it's really kind of hard because you really have to think about it as you're reading. What are they saying? What do these words mean? Why is he saying it like that? All these little inner monologues going on in your head while you're reading it. Whereas if you're sitting there watching the movie or a TV show, it's just, you're just watching and
Right.
enjoying
Has
what
any
you're
of you ever
seeing.
tried to get through Mary Shelley's Frankenstein? Like, ouch. Yeah, snooze fest, honestly. It's a serious
I was
snooze fest.
just thinking about what you said, and I couldn't think of any films that were better than books, but I can think of some remakes of films that are worse than the originals.
Oh, really? And
Yeah,
what would that
but
be?
in my opinion, there was a movie called The Day the Earth Stood Still, 1951, black and white,
Oh,
and there was a remake in 2007, 2008,
was
which
that
I
the one
didn't
with
think was
Keanu
good.
Reeves?
That's right, yeah, and
Okay.
yeah, I can't think of her name, but yeah, that's one. But I didn't think it was as good. The remake was, oh, Total Recall. There's another one. The original with
I agree with
Schwarzenegger
you
was a good
there.
film. The short story
Yeah.
was a fantastic short story. The film with Schwarzenegger was very close to the short story and was very good. The remake, well, not so much, I don't think.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
and it makes you wonder why they remade it, if you
Well,
know
I
what I
think
mean.
maybe, what do you think, Rodney? I think there's a lot of because there's a lot more graphic, CGI stuff, that can be done now. And I think films sometimes rely a little too much on CGI.
They do, and especially, as Richard was saying, the modern remakes versus the classics from the 50s, 60s, 70s, those are actually better films, in
Mm.
my opinion, as well. Only because so the people that write the newer ones, they basically have to write in a certain way to allow for more time for visual effects over
Mm,
actual dialogue. Um,
excellent point.
so so the dialogue in these are nowhere near as good. The scene setting, character building in these classic movies was so much better because that's where they had to spend the majority of their budgets in script writing, versus now they have to spend their budgets on visual effects and
Right.
audio effects.
Exactly. What do you got? All right. What do you guys think of how Game of Thrones started off kind of totally sticking to George R. Martin's novels? I mean, I read the novels and seen the show as well. And it was sticking really close there in season 1, 2, and 3. But after that, it was like slowly but surely they were just doing whatever they wanted until season 8. A lot of people thought it was a complete and utter disaster because it was unrecognizable. from
I think
anything Martin wrote.
You could tell where they ran out of source material in Game of Thrones, and you could tell immediately that they'd run out of stuff from George R.R. Martin to adapt, and they were making it up as they went along. And it was so obvious to me. It was so obvious that that it was going to get worse from that point.
I think a lot of us were cringing.
Yeah, it was a very good indication that George Martin actually kind of checked out after season 3, because they had started moving further and further away from the books by the middle of season 2. That he really didn't have a whole lot to say. He was really there just as a creative producer, which means that he was just a consultant. So he had to sit back and watch them.
Well, they just took liberties with his intellectual property.
So you could clearly tell that he had checked out after season 3, and he just said, "Okay, HBO, do whatever you want to do. I don't care."
Yeah, clearly. What do you think, Mr. B? Did you watch Game of Thrones? Are you a GOT
Well, the thing
fan?
is, I had great anticipation for what would happen in the end. And then I had to go travel overseas, as I often do, and come back. And my wife told me, "No, just shaking her head, thumbs down." They hyped everyone up, and it did not give an outcome. The outcome was like a dud.
Actually, if you kind of follow the news of what's going on, there's going to be a Jon Snow mini
I heard about
series,
that.
and I believe all that time they just adapted the ending to set up the sequels that they want to make. So it's just,
you think that sounds about right. Actually, it's all about milking it and making it go more and more and more, which is really sad because the art of it gets lost and it becomes just this franchise that's there to make money.
It's a shame when they have to do that, because there are so many other good books out there that they could adapt, and yet they persist in producing something that's now only loosely based on something that happened a long while ago.
Right. Exactly. Richard, you said something to me very recently, when I'm really close. For those of you who don't know, I'm like that close to producing my new novel, The Buchanan Bastard, and I'm very proud of this one. I've worked really, really hard on it. I think it's some of the best writing I've ever done. And somebody suggested that maybe I should give it a try, to go find an agent and do what I could to traditionally publish this one. But you said something to me that really stuck. You said, they may, once you sign that contract, it's theirs to do with whatever they want. They might take even years to get it published. And even then they might change it all or make you change it to be commercialized. And then it's not really your art anymore. It's not your voice ever again.
There's a very good friend of mine who traditionally publishes and self-publishes. And she is always complaining that her traditional publishers want so many changes. They change characters' names, they change the settings. They don't want this for whatever reason. That's not appropriate. And in the end, she spends so much time having to change her voice that in the end, it almost feels like it isn't her voice. And so she self-publishes the other stuff now, because at least she can say exactly what she wants.
Yeah.
And
I get that.
And on a side note, if as going towards film, if you are if you're a self-published writer and you're approached to option your rights for a video or a movie or even a video game, ask one of the most ridiculous numbers you can think of for that price to option those rights, because once you sell those rights, you don't have much say in what they do with it.
Right.
Exactly.
So you need to at least be happy with something and be happy with that paycheck.
So I've heard that in Hollywood, the writer is is just below the T-boy, but I don't know in the scheme of things. I don't know how true that is.
Kind of goes with my kill the writer. What I would say. Yes.
On this
Go
program,
ahead, Mr. B.
on this program, I get to be the devil's advocate. So in you guys' mind, and this is my rhetorical and actual question to you, what kind of book should never be a movie?
That's a good question. What do you think, guys? What book should never be a movie?
Or type of books or categories of books, because everybody keeps thinking they can make a movie since I was approached to do that.
Well,
and I'm
okay,
like,
here's one idea.
Okay.
There's some vanity projects out there. I mean, by a vanity book, people thinking that their life story is far more interesting than it really is. You know, so I think something like that should probably never be a movie because not only will it not make money, it'll be boring as dirt. You know, so there's one thing.
And for our listeners, can we clarify if a documentary is a movie or some kind of commercial type short story is a movie?
Documentary is a movie, but it
good.
is a movie with the purpose of creating awareness over a topic of some kind, you know, that's very important to the filmmaker. I made a documentary actually of my own called Lemonade, and you can find it on YouTube for free. Just look up Lemonade, the film, Dedra, not to confuse it with Lemonade, the Beyonce video, because you don't want to get like all the hits from her video.
Right.
So type that into YouTube and you'll get my film. And it's about creating awareness for autism. So I think documentaries have a fantastic place in educating, you know, people. But should they be feature films, like narrative films? I don't know. Not always.
Because as much as I think the art of giving back is pretty cool to talk about, I do not think it's a cool movie. And it talks about my life.
It could potentially be a documentary, though.
And when I had one picture when I was like 9 years old, I was like, how are they going to make a movie out of my life story when I had only one photograph of me that was 9 years old? And so I was like, nah.
There's CGI, Mr. B. We can we can do
CGI,
some serious
there
things with CGI.
Oh, okay. I don't know what that means.
Yes.
Okay, for our listening audience, what's CGI?
I'll let you answer that, Rodney. You're the best qualified.
It's computer generated illustration. So which really is just computer generated graphics, visual effects, anything visual that's computer generated.
Like how they made Will Smith look like a younger version of himself in The Gemini Man.
Yeah, or
that was all CGI.
Yeah, or Luke Skywalker in The Bounty Hunter when he came back so young. Yeah.
Yes.
Okay,
now there's something that I couldn't understand. Star Wars. Oh my God, don't get me started. I mean, I'm a big Star Wars fan, and the comic books, many people would say that the comic books have been highly insulted by what happened with the spin-off movies, the prequel trilogy. What do you think, Rod? Do you agree with that? I mean, Luke Skywalker portrayed as a pessimist. I mean, he's like the most optimistic person in the universe, you know, and this guy giving up on the Jedi cause. I mean, that wasn't in the comic books. Correct me if I'm wrong.
Well, I'm really the wrong person. I'm not really a Star Wars fan.
What about you, Richard? How you a Star Wars dude?
Yeah, I watched all the original three. I actually saw the first one in New York in 1977.
Which were great.
And I was blown away by it. I'd never seen anything like it before. I like the original three. The prequel three, not so much. And the last three, I haven't really got into at all.
The last three.
I've got them all. I've watched the first one, and Rogue One. I thought Rogue One was really good. Actually, I thought that was an excellent spin-off.
Rogue One
with a really good story and really good acting, and the whole thing just gelled together and made a lot of sense, fitted into the timeline. The last couple of films I just can't get enthusiastic about, I'm afraid.
Yeah, and you know, to add to my statement there, I do like some of the spinoffs. I do like The Bounty Hunter. I do like Rogue One. Some of the upcoming Star Wars universe short series.
I do like Obi-Wan Kenobi.
Yeah, I thought that
Obi-Wan
was
Kenobi is fantastic. Now I
yeah.
love that one.
But the original films I just never got into. I just can't tolerate bad acting. Um, I'm and even though I'm more of a Star Trek fan, which has even worse acting in their movies, um,
But I love Star Trek too. I mean, everybody says pick a side. Are you a Star Wars or a Trekkie? I can't. I can't pick a side. I'm both. I can't help it. I love them both. I'm such a
You're an
nerd.
artist. You're an artist. But what I would hope that happened, and hope would happen in the future, especially for the generations coming up, because I realize I'm 60, and it must be a bunch of 15 and 30-year-olds that might still want to read. But I'm hoping that they would, at least since we're talking about books into movies and movies' relationship with books, that they start putting all the books about the movie that they come from in front of the theater or on the scenes around or in the media or in advertising. Because a lot of things I didn't realize they even had a book relating to that movie. All we knew, as far as Star Wars, we were talking about that. Gosh, did I know there was a book? No. I didn't give it any thought. And so sometimes we're into
Totally.
visual, and I am a very visual creature, but it would have been nice to know that I could have gotten a lot more details if I had read the book. And so I think it's inspiring to bring them out at the same time again, or republish or re-advertise the book that relates to a movie and vice versa.
yeah. In the case of Star Wars, though, it was reversed. It was the movie first, and then they wrote a book.
Right.
But it started out as a movie first.
And that would have been
Right.
cool to
And
interrelate
then
those or
loads
put
of
them in
comic
there.
books
Yeah.
as
Yeah.
well.
But the
Right.
Star Wars, most of the Star Wars books, though, I've read are very good.
Yeah, and I
Yeah.
realize it's a marketing ploy, a marketing strategy. They tend to bring out sellers like images and or dolls and or other CDs at a time or a game. So I knew they were back in the late 90s, they were starting to have a game that relates to the hit movie every time.
Yeah,
So it's really
good old
cool. But
yeah,
they should have always bring a book.
ancillary products.
Yeah.
That's the best.
Ancillary products are where they make most of their money,
Yeah.
actually, is through ancillary products. So that's going to be a big consideration on whether or not your book actually does become a movie, is the possibility of ancillary products. Am I wrong there, Rodney? I mean, ancillary products are going to be
Yeah,
the best thing that markets your chances, of
yeah,
having that turned into a film.
yeah, and the self-published writers always keep that in the back of your mind. How can I market my IP the
Yes.
best? And then, how is this going to work with ancillary products, sequels,
Mhm.
rolling off into different stories? But yeah,
Or even
ancillary
apparel.
product.
Some people might like those apparels that goes with it, anything like
Swag.
that.
Yeah, swag.
Right?
Yeah, absolutely. I think a lot of Richard's stuff has great possibility there, actually. I really hope that for you one day, Richard. I think you
Well, that'd be
totally
nice.
deserve
Yeah,
it. His stuff is
indeed.
so imaginative.
There a lot of the stuff that started off as a short story has now become a series. And or a pet, my amateur detective.
There you
She
go.
started off as a short story. I'm writing the 6th adventure at the moment. So
Nice.
and I've got a spin-off in the pipeline.
Okay.
Occasionally I'll put a short story up on my website or somewhere, just as a bit of spin-off, a bit of background, just to try and get people interested in the concept. So hopefully then they'll go on and start the series. But yeah,
You're
it's,
doing
you know,
well.
as
You're
Rodney
even
said,
doing TikTok now, which I'm really happy to see.
I've started doing TikToks. I'm finding it a bit difficult, but that's because I'm old. But
You're
I'll get
navigating
I'll
just
get the hang
fine
of
as
it.
far as I can see.
Sure.
On behalf of all the listeners, I'm going to thank you guys for having things out there, because all of us need something to give back to ourselves, which is a form of entertainment that brings pleasure to our minds, our eyesight, and our mental well-being. And Dedra, I'm so glad that you bring this group together to share what's out there for us literary
My
addicts.
pleasure.
So I
Well,
look forward to
you
that.
guys are part of my tribe. We have our tribe, and I think that, as writers, we just want everybody to know that everything you enjoy out there that you every time you sit back in your television or you sit in the cinema and eat popcorn and watch a movie or you watch Netflix, you know, that started in the head of a writer somewhere, you know, maybe people like us, you know, who knows, right?
Very true. Yeah, it's very true.
Exactly. So yeah, you're right, Mr. B. It's really good to bring out, you know, the idea that maybe reading, you know, should be, you know, we should all bring it back to books, you know, bring it back somehow. So we
Very true.
appreciate, well, I appreciate you guys too being here for this episode. And I guess, you know, Mr. B, you want to wrap it up today?
Well, we look forward to next week and look forward to meeting up with you in Dubai. And hopefully we can meet for coffee. I have a business trip there, and so being on location would be very nice with you, me, and ICED.
And Samina. Yeah, that's right.
It'll be spanking hot over there like you did on your TikTok. So we'll be drinking iced tea.
Well, it was 46 degrees that day. I just couldn't let that one go.
So we look forward to
that's
you
Celsius,
helping us,
by the way, for those of you who are in Fahrenheit.
and we look forward to you helping us analyze or compare the differences between the screenplays and writing books. I think that's next week's topic. So it's always an exciting topic, and we're staying according to our theme. And so all of you, RW, Richard, and Dedra, I really appreciate it very, very much, and thank you for keeping things going right here on Free Talk with Dedra Stevenson.
All right. See you next time, guys.
Yeah. See you next week.
Okay. Bye. See you.
Bye.